as I prepared for this, I was curious that when you're out in the orchard, I'm assuming that you're an early riser and that you're out early.
No, you'd be absolutely wrong. I work late at night.
You work late and you sleep.
Well, I can get up if I need to, but I don't choose to do that as a habit.
Well, I'll rephrase my question a little bit then. In the late evenings, you're walking around the orchard, the sun's setting in Indiana and the dew's starting to settle and the birds are going to sleep. Where's your head? Are you thinking about the past and the history and the family that's been on that property in the past? Or are you looking to the future?
Well, I'm generally cogitating on the challenge of the day.
In the present?
And sometimes it involves the business, sometimes it involves personal, sometimes it involves, things beyond the business, the breeding program, say, or or family. I mean, there's things to think about there and try to think ahead to the next step. I mean, I am very comfortable with where I am at, and it is a comfort place to be out in the plantings most days, most of the time. There's times where it's, when the rush is on and the fruit does not care about my schedule or what's possible humanly done. It has its own trajectory that try to guide as best you can, but a lot of it's really not under control.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're reactive, you've lost the game.
You're already too slow.
Already too slow, yes.
I think that's a great way to start this episode. Thank you for joining us in the studio today. I've got David and Valerie Doud of Douds County Line Orchard, which is located about 3 miles, 2.5, 3 miles south of Rowan, Indiana.
It's 2 miles south and 1 mile west of Rowan, Indiana.
Right on county line and 400 north.
Yeah, of Wabash County.
That's right.
Because it's the county line, that's 800 north of Miami County.
That's right.
Look at the green signs on the correct side of the road, you'll do fine.
Again, welcome to the podcast studio. Thank you for agreeing to be here and to share a little bit of the history and the passion that you have for apples and for Wabash County.
Thank you.
David, I thought we would start by talking a little bit about the family history. If I recall right, because we have, but it's been a long time ago, probably close to 20 years ago. I don't know if you'll remember this, but I had salvaged an old beam out of a barn that had fallen. And I was using it in a kitchen remodel project. And you had a wood miser, I think is what the appropriate term is.
I still have it.
Yes. And you still have it. And you were kind enough to kind of plank off some of the boards that I needed off of that. And I think that was maybe my very first time of meeting you, actually.
Possibly. I don't have a distinct recollection of that. You're not the only person that's been in that situation.
I'm sure. And I'd been out to pick strawberries back in the day when you had strawberries. And then, Valerie, you and I had served on the Rowan Library Board together.
Well, I wasn't actually on the library board.
You weren't.
But I helped clerk there.
You helped clerk. Okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then we were on the festival board then.
Festival.
Together.
Mm-hmm. I was very involved in the festival.
Yeah.
Decade. David was on the library board.
I got on the library board early 80s sometime.
Okay.
When you serve 20 years, you've got to take a year off. And my second year off, now I have, much to everybody's advantage, Valerie now serves on the library board.
And so now I'm on the library board.
You are now.
Yes,
okay.
This is my second.
I'm very proud of the boards that I've served with, and we've done a lot with that. We've got an addition done to the building that we're very proud of and really brought it into the 21st century, and proud of the people I've served with. I'm proud to have been part of that.
And it's, I think we'll get back to that volunteer part of your life and the time that you spent in Wabash County a little bit later. But yes, thank you for the time that you've spent on the library board and the festival board. David, your family history and the farm that you're now on there at County Line, how many generations does that go back?
5, but we have long generations in the family as a tradition. And so that, my great great-grandfather Ezekiel Reed had 5 sections of property, 3 in Wabash County, 2 in Miami County. And this is actually the 30 acres that we purchased in 1980 had been out of the family for a while. That was the 30 acres carved off of one section, and it was kind of brought back into the family. It's where we drove our stake and made our stand, and here we are. And it's poor people have always lived there, and the tradition continues. But it's still, my father complained about it being poor farm ground. And it is poor farm ground. It's woods and creek bottom, a little bit of mediocre tillable type ground. So I live right across the road from where I grew up, and I'm very pleased and happy to still be there. It's a great spot.
Sure. How many of those generations were fruit farmers?
Well, so my grandfather, Lorenzo Doud, married Elba Reed, the baby of Marion and Emma Reed's family, and in that way came into possession of the property to operate it in 1921.
Okay.
And my father came back from school. He was headed for graduate school, but came to the farm in the late 1930s. The main orchard was over at Doud Orchards on State Road 19 in Miami County, and he established Quality Plus Orchard at, again, across the road from where we are now. That's where I grew up. There were 3 siblings, my older brother, my younger sister, and myself, and nobody really wanted to leave home. 2 of us really didn't. So my brother is a neighbor to us, and again, if you're not a corn grower, it's a bit of paradise, really is.
Yeah. So you grew up from a young age in fruit farming.
Yes, all my life, literally.
Apples, peaches. I know at one point you had strawberries, and I don't think you do today, or
We
at
gave
least.
up strawberries 2 years ago,
Okay.
just 1 year ago. We had a 32-year run with them, and they were very good to the farm. Tree crops all the crops have their vulnerabilities.
Sure.
And there were years where the strawberry money made the tax payments and the insurance payments and kept us on the farm when the tree crops were greatly diminished.
And seasonally, the harvest for the strawberries are obviously very early compared to apples. And so does that help the work balance, or is there other stuff going on with the apples early in the year?
Well, you got to keep all the crops maintained as necessary, but it was also income in June, which is income in the spring. I mean, it's all outgo. So it's August 3rd today, something like that, and I've had 4 days this year so far that I've made more money than I spent, and that's been the last 4 days.
Yeah.
And it's, before we had that little boost in June, and we looked really smart there some years. Early years, I just wondered why everybody didn't do this. It was just incredible. The reason that everybody doesn't do this is that, the site wears out. You chase 3 acres of strawberries around a 4-acre patch, and 20 years later, they do not do what they used to do and can't make them do it because it's diseases build up and nutrition and all the issues that go with cropping come into play. So we flogged it longer than we should have probably, which is a general, I want to say, the way I do everything.
So you grow up knowing nothing but fruit farming from a young age, but
Well, no, that's not true. I mean, Dad ran a commercial nursery. We propagated trees and sold, he was the early adopter of the size controlling rootstocks, one of the first places in the U.S. where these dwarf trees were available, and he's very progressive. So tree propagation and the nursery business, certainly I was very aware of that, and it was a very integral part. Dad was happier as a nurseryman than he was a fruit grower.
okay. So that kind of answers a question that I had, is that you don't just have an orchard out at county line where people come and pick and you maintain the plants. you've
No,
re-
we do
you,
not. We do not run a U-pick.
oh, you don't do a U-pick anymore. Okay.
No, I really never did.
Oh, really?
Well, the strawberries were.
Well, the strawberries,
Mhm.
okay,
Okay.
yeah. The tree crops I harvest and sell.
But you've really played an important role in the new fruit development. Is it your entire career, or is it something you've gotten into in the last certain number of years?
Well, in the late 1990s, 1995, 96, it became very evident the land grant colleges were going out of the apple breeding program. New material was not going to be available to small growers. You know, the people that we depended on for 80 years before that, you know, those programs were being phased out, or they were running on it using a for-profit type of strategy that excluded people. And it was the small growers that were going to be excluded. And, you know, there was a number of people, particularly Ed Fackler of Southern Indiana and Mitchell End of Ohio, that, you know, really saw that nobody else was going to do it for us. So that in the finest Midwestern tradition, we decided to do it ourselves. Now, I climbed on board right away. It was an easy decision. You know, we rustled up and we came up with 50 people that committed to giving $100 a year for 10 years to start a breeding program. And, you know, frankly, there is no technical difficulty with breeding apples. I mean, it's a series of simple steps that have to be done on a timely basis, but there's nothing, you know, don't need a PhD to do any of those steps. The real challenge is holding the whole program together for, you know, the 10 to 15 years it takes to create a seed, plant it, grow it, and fruit it, and then evaluate the fruit.
And that's a 10 to 15 year.
So I didn't make any crosses in 2025, but 2024, I turned 800 seeds over to the organization that were controlled crosses of some different material, several different parents. And so they go, you know, you turn them in the wintertime and they are germinated early spring and create a small little seedling, and you grow that in a nursery situation for a year, and then you plant that seedling in a row with, you know, hopefully thousands more like it, because it's a numbers game, and you grow that until it fruits. Now, the fruiting there's a juvenile period in apples, particularly, that it's basically so many cell divisions on the apical meristem. So it's the growing point, it takes several years to reach that.
Okay.
So 5, 6 years later, after you plant that to the row, maybe you start getting some fruit. And then you got to go down the row and evaluate the fruit. And 99% of them are substandard and are discarded. And then there's a small fraction that is of interest. They are propagated further for further testing, but it's years and years and years. And individuals have a hard time holding that together. Organizations are better suited for that longevity. We were fortunate. You know, there's difference between luck and fortune. People say we were lucky. Not really. You know, luck would be finding it in the fence row. That's where traditional apples came from. You know, feed horses back in 100 years ago, and horse pasture would be full of apple seedlings, and one of them be better than the others, and you know there's your new variety, and so that's luck.
Mm-hmm.
Fortune is like doing the work and having it pay off. We did the work. We were amateurs. We were looking out for our own interests. There was a lot of people were skeptical, and we were always treated well by professionals. In other words, still a lot of professional breeders reaching retirement age at that point, and whenever we asked for help or asked for information, and we were treated very well by professionals, but we were snickered at by a lot of people. We laugh at ourselves, so nothing personal there. And, you know, and we were fortunate. The work paid off. We did 50,000 seedlings. They were distributed among 10 or 12 growers, and those growers grew them till they started fruiting. And we walked the rows, we evaluated the fruit, and we found good stuff and good fortune. I mean, a lot of people got crosses we did that had no interest. I mean, they fruited and they were just not good and not anything that you would increase.
And so, out of this group and all this testing, the growing, you at David Doud's County Line Orchard came up with a variety that's called the Evercrisp.
So here we go. Evercrisp is the trademark name of the variety MAIA1. So patents run out, trademarks for forever. And so with the way that the Midwest Apple Improvement Association has monetized our good fortune, we have a trademark name that is not the variety name. So the apples are sold as Evercrisp, trademark, and the variety is MAIA1. And so by the luck of the draw, that seedling tree ended up on my farm. So, I mean, any of the other dozen people that were growing seedlings out might have received that one, but by the luck of the draw, I did, and it didn't kill it. I mean, well, you laugh. We lost a lot of seedlings. I mean,
Sure.
farms change hands, and deer get in there, and hard times come. The first thing goes is, hobbies like seedling apple trees, and so I did my part. And I want to say, rest is history, or it's ongoing history. I don't know. It's kind of a big deal in a small community, and
But now that Evercrisp trademark name can be found grocery stores across the world.
yes, we're getting about over 3 million trees planted and on 4 continents. And I mean, it's the wholesale apple business it's a tough business, and none of us were wholesale apple growers, really. Everybody that was involved in this program were direct marketers, and we were looking out for direct marketers. We're looking out for ourselves because, we were not going to get Cosmic Crisp from Washington State or Snapdragon or Ruby Frost from the New York program, or, Honeycrisp, the big dog, was kind of the last of the open releases from university breeding programs. They developed that and they just threw it to the world. And they made a lot of money from tree royalties, but the patent has run out. They're not making any money anymore. Well, they started breeding with it. And, the next generation, well, they auctioned it off to the next big thing corporation, and that's a club variety, a sweet tango. You may see that in a grocery store somewhere, and that was kind of the next thing up. And it can only be grown by members of this club, and it's like an exclusive club. I'm not a member of it, and they wouldn't have me, and that's okay. And so, and again, that's what we saw coming. That's, you look at the way things were in the mid 1990s, that was the way it was going to be. And so, we didn't want to be left out of growing superior apple varieties. So we forced to take action in our own interest.
So I don't want to go too deep into the woods here because our listeners may not be as interested in this as I am.
I can't imagine they would.
But when you're creating the Evercrisp, you started with what? Honeycrisp and
Fuji.
Fuji. And what are you looking for out of both of those two apples? And you obviously don't know until it is created, but are there certain genetics or certain traits that you're looking from each apple variety that you're hoping come together?
Well, so Fuji is far and away the most widely grown apple in the world, mainly because of China. But I mean, it's widely grown and it's recognized as high quality. Honeycrisp absolutely just reset the bar for apples, particularly in the U.S. It's not been the phenomenon internationally that it has been in the U.S., but that crispy texture, I spent my life listening to people ask for a hard apple, for a crisp apple, well, they were asking for Honeycrisp. Honeycrisp is a problem child. It has lots of growing issues. The tree is bad. The fruit are subject to calcium disorders. They get disease worse than a lot of things. They've ripen unevenly. They fall on the ground. They are maybe twice the price, but they're half the production. So it's not even really a wash to the grower. Particularly in Minnesota, they're more climatically adapted. So
Okay.
they have fewer of these issues. When you get into the warmer climates like the upper Midwest, it's a frustrating apple to deal with. But it has this, good ones have this quality that, it's a revolutionary apple. And yeah, I will say Honeycrisp is revolutionary. All our varieties are evolutionary. So, the thought was that, you take the most widely grown apple in the world and cross it with this revolutionary apple, and you see what it looks like. Now, I want to say, can't always look at the parents and see what the kids do not always reflect the parents. And in this case, that was a tremendously successful cross, not only from this apple, but there were a couple more, actually 3 more varieties that came out of that same cross, which is, the percentages associated with making that cross and the good stuff that came out is just unheard of. It's usually you're looking, the standard is 1 in 10,000 seedlings is something you're looking for. And here we released 3 varieties out of 320 seedlings that I received of that cross. So the synergy between the parents was tremendous.
How many varieties do you currently grow on the farm?
I do not know.
You don't know.
Quite a few.
Yeah. You're not a U-pick, so you're selling direct from the farm. Are you selling to distributors? How can people get their hands on your apples?
So we're open seasonally on the farm. Our standard hours are 1 to 5 on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And I do a Wednesday market in West Lafayette. I do a Saturday morning market in North Manchester. I deliver to Indianapolis every week or two, generally on Thursday. And there's a little CSA there, or a little association. My daughter kind of organizes that, and we deliver to her porch and go around to some restaurants and firms. And that's a nice day. We can visit with the girls and make a little money at the same time.
So let's stop there for a minute. So you mentioned your daughter. You're married to our other guest here that we haven't introduced really yet, Valerie. And you guys have been married for how long?
48 years.
You were just testing to make sure she knew.
Been a while.
And together you have 3 kids. And you mentioned your daughter. She lives in Indianapolis.
We have a daughter, our eldest, Emma, and our middle child, Teresa, both live in Indianapolis.
Okay. And then you have a son as well?
Yes, Michael lives in California.
California. Okay. None of them are in the apple production business at this time?
No, and, they all have their...
Careers.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, why don't you talk for a while, honey?
Okay.
You can talk about the kids.
So Emma's our oldest, and all 3 went to Purdue in chemistry of some sort. Emma and her husband, Aaron, moved to Indianapolis several years ago, and she is the associate director for proteome analysis at IU School of Medicine. And her husband's a cardiologist at Community East. And then our middle daughter, Teresa, lives in Irvington, and she is a high school chemistry teacher at Franklin Central, which is Beech Grove. And then our son finished his PhD in chemistry out in San Diego. He went to UC San Diego and met his wife, Mana, who also has her PhD in chemistry. And he is an assistant professor of chemistry at Irvine Valley Community College. And she is associate director of system engineering at Nano Select. So, and then Joji, our grandson, is going into 2nd grade.
And you were in education.
Mm-hmm.
You taught for how many years?
I taught in Peru Community Schools for 32 years.
And you mentioned earlier to me you retired about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're
Yes.
still active in the schools as substitute teaching when needed.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you need a little bit of that. You need time with the youth and in the classroom, or what drives you back to the class?
I still really enjoy the community. And many of the teachers that I taught with, my colleagues are still working there. So it's really nice to reconnect. And I also recall what it was like as a teacher to have someone in the room who knew what they were doing. And so there are some people I probably won't substitute for. I tried PE when I first went back to subbing, and I just don't really have a good feeling about walking in, and especially when they go into the locker rooms. I just didn't really appreciate that subbing there, but I love subbing for all different subject areas and just connecting with the kids again. But after a few days, I'm satisfied with that
Right.
exposure.
Now, in the summer times when you weren't teaching, were you at the farm working with David, or what were your summers like?
Well, when the kids were at home, they helped with the strawberry patch, and I did as well. I answered the phones and called people back. That was one of my major jobs. And when I went to the high school, so my degree is in biology, and I taught junior high for 24 years, seventh and eighth grade. And then last 8 years, I was at the high school. I spent 4 summers taking classes to learn to teach Project Lead the Way biomedical classes to the high school students. So that took a big chunk out of my time.
Mm-hmm.
I also am a lay leader at our United Methodist Church in Rowan. And so I was representing our church at church conference as well.
Did you guys meet at school? I know, David, you went to Purdue, if I remember
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And Valerie, you went there as well?
Yes, I'm originally from St. Louis.
Okay.
And when I started applying for colleges, I found out that Purdue had cooperative housing. So I applied for cooperative housing, and we took a trip, and I went through Rush, and I got into Antwoodale Cooperative House. When I got my financial aid package, that made a huge difference in the affordability of paying out of state tuition. And I got good financial aid from Purdue as well. So I decided to go to Purdue. And David lived at Neal House Cooperative, and we met at a party.
And you said all three of your kids then went on to do their undergrad at Purdue.
Correct.
I grew up in Terre Haute, and so, that's fairly close to Lafayette,
Mm-hmm.
but it seemed like we had more of a draw towards Bloomington. And so you had a lot of IU fans and a lot of IU family down there. And that was a change for me 21 years ago when we moved up here, was how strong the Purdue draw was. And, from people that I work with that have an old ambulance, they've turned into a Purdue tailgate vehicle to go to football games. But I really appreciate that strong connection, that where the family is just like, yeah, we're going. That's where mom and dad went, and we grew up there, and that's where, so I really appreciate that.
I told him I would pay for Purdue and one other application. If they wanted to apply for others, they'd have to get the funding somehow. And our middle one, she said, Mom, I'm only applying to Purdue. That's where I'm going. So, but I'd never experienced anything in my life like this Purdue IU thing. Missouri just has Mizzou. And so I didn't know about the deep competition, rivalry, I guess. Yeah. So I'm a 7th grade science teacher my first year, and they always say, oh, tell the kids a little bit about yourself. So, I'm introducing myself to my 7th graders, and they're, young teenagers. And I'm like, okay. And then I got my biology degree from Purdue, and one kid just yelled out, ew, PU, why would you go there? And I'm like, to get an education. It was just kind of, well, maybe I won't tell them about myself.
So, David, I want to go back to the apples that you do grow on the farm and where the local people, they can come out. You said you were open select hours during harvest. You've also got peaches out on the farm. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, as of this date of recording this, it's August 3rd or whatever it is, 4th. And, we are very active in the peach business right now. That will end 1st of September or so. That's peaches are happy with hot weather, and they're a good August crop, but they get them into the late season and cool nights, they just are not nearly the fruit they are
Yeah.
in August. So in good years, we have 5 weeks of peaches.
5 weeks.
Yeah.
So for the layman, the peaches that we're getting from our local grocery stores year round, or even apples for that matter, where are they coming from?
Well, peaches are pretty seasonal. They have a hard time in the wholesale market because of handling. A ripe peach does not handle, and a unripe peach is not a very good fruit. So our place, we specialize in selling ripe peaches, which are delicate and perishable. And so, I'm not an expert on wholesale peaches. Can tell you a little bit about apples now, but peaches are a southern crop, and southern Indiana has a small peach industry. Certainly, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And if you look on the cartons, probably going to be coming from there. California has a big stone fruit business, but again, shipping, I'm not sure how much California fruit ends up in Midwestern markets.
Like I talked with Jared and Erica Cordes in an earlier episode, if somebody hasn't gone to your farm and ate a fresh peach, they haven't tasted a peach. If they've bought from the store and it's had to travel any distance at all, it's probably been picked when it was a little firm. And same with their strawberries. If you're not picking the strawberries or the blackberries right from their farm, it just has a different taste, different texture, and different color.
Yes, and what do I say? In peaches, I know a little bit about this, but the breeding for modern varieties is now moved to a firm flesh. So the modern wholesale peach is not going to be a melting flesh. It's going to be a firm flesh. And hopefully that will allow handling at a little riper stage for a little bit better flavor through the wholesale channels. It's just a problematic fruit for handling. So, I like to say that we've got the best fruit. Certainly other places grow very well. We do the best we can, and it's better than average. And I don't want to slag on grocery stores. I mean, we are surrounded by a cornucopia of abundance that kings of 100 years wouldn't dream of, and so we nitpick about quality, and that's fair, but it's also unfair, to live in this abundance and then complain about it.
Sure.
So, yes, the apples that were grown in Washington State, harvested 9 months ago, that are showing up in the grocery stores now, yes, come out to the farm and I can show you something better. But we still, it's still available. Fresh fruit is available to you year round. And it's a great privilege to live in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of all the fruits that are grown on the farm, do you have a favorite recipe from apples or peaches?
Well, there are a couple of recipes I use. One is his grandma Elba Doud's apple salad is an excellent mix of various things, and you actually don't use a mayonnaise base on this apple salad. It is a more of a lemon juice custard base and whipped cream. It's an excellent apple salad. I also do like to make apple crisp, apple cakes, things like that. But favorite way to eat is fresh.
It's fresh. Okay.
I often have customers come in right now asking which variety is my favorite. Like whichever one is ready right now, then I can have fresh.
How many apples are you picking? Or I'm not sure how the best way is this, by pounds or bushels, but how many are you able to produce out of your farm? And I'm sure
Well,
that varies from year to year.
Yes, it varies. And, I have never kept track. I, frankly, with the variation between years, I recognize that, my orchard has changed tremendously since my initial planting in 1988. And well, I've got too many of these, they're going out, this is going in. And, it's easy to recognize what I can't get sold or what does not sell readily. And I make my adjustments like that. Back at the big orchard when I worked there for my parents. We would track what came in, keep track of those bushels. And I want to say I tried that when we started, and I wasn't getting any benefit from it, so I just gave it up. It's maybe not the most business-like aspect, but I'm kind of an artist anyway.
Outside of the apples, you guys have poured a lot of your time and effort into the Wabash community, and specifically kind of that Rowan area. Valerie, you'd mentioned earlier about the Methodist Church and the time you've put in there, and that David, you were on the library board for 20 years and
40
total years, and helped see an addition kind of towards the back of the library, I think it is.
We installed an elevator, and we brought building up to 21st century standards. And
yeah, it's a beautiful library and there on Chippewa in Rowan if you're driving through. You guys are also involved in the Stockdale Mill now, is that right?
Yes. When Dwight and Suzanne Bouts bought the mill in 2001, and then they formed the Stockdale Mill Foundation, not for profit, they formed a board, and they both wanted David for sure, but then they also realized that it was helpful to have couples come to the board meetings. And so we had Ken and Kathy Grandstaff and David and Valerie Doud. We had
Ron and Jennifer
McCauley. I believe Fred and Pam Musselman were some of the first ones as well. So good, solid group of people. Some are no longer with us, but just a lovely way to get started with a not-for-profit and saving a historic landmark.
Yeah, that's really something that what they've done out there. I moved to town about that same time when they just purchased the Stockdale Mill. And between the mill and the covered bridge, I mean, it's really fortunate that our community has both of those, and Manchester's covered bridge as well.
Yes.
But I think that it's just one other example of how the people of Wabash County pour into the things that really mean a lot to them. It doesn't mean that it applies to everybody, that everything is important to everybody, but the things that they do find important, they will pour and they're so passionate about. Whether that is the Charlie Creek Inn downtown, which meant a lot to Richard Ford and helped downtown, or you take the Stockdale Mill, or when the covered bridge had the fire. Mm-hmm. The community comes together, whether that's county council, county commissioners, and helping make sure that the funding gets there for a bridge or the water suppression system. This community is different than any other that I've lived in that they will pour themselves into those projects. So thank you for doing that work with the Stockdale Mill. I know that it's been seasonally, it's been opened. Was it last year that it did not open to the public?
Correct, yes. We didn't open last year because the foundation needed to be worked on. It was not safe. We worked with the community foundation in North Manchester and several Wolf Construction and Dyson's and several other companies worked to help crib the whole thing up and replace beams with steel beams, and some of the concrete was replaced, and so it's safe again and it's up and running.
Good. And so it's open usually on Saturdays?
Yes, Saturdays from noon till 4.
Okay. And it kind of hits the highlight, I would say, during the Rowan Covered Bridge Festival, which happens in September every year, the weekend after Labor Day. So if you're listening to this podcast and timing works out, come out to Rowan Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. Check out tractor pulls or take the trip down. I think we used to run the trolley over that way. I don't know if we still do.
I'm not sure this year. I'm not sure of all the details, but that has been a tremendous positive addition to the Rowan Festival to have the trolley.
Easy way to get from the downtown area out to Stockdale, just a mile or so outside of town.
And then, of course, the next day is Dam to Dam ride.
And the Dam to Dam bike ride on Sunday.
And they still stop at the Stockdale Mill.
We do. Actually, this year is our first year that we're doing a 3-day event. So there'll be events on Friday. Saturday, we'll be in Rowan for the pancake breakfast. We'll do a morning ride. And then Sunday will be your traditional Dam to Dam. So
that's exciting.
We're excited for it. Mm-hmm. Is there anything? Pancakes.
Yeah.
David, what kind of work do you do with the Stockdale Mill on the board?
Well, early, 20 years ago or when that was happening, I donated some wood misering and some lumber, some trees to the effort.
When the tornado took the roof off.
Yeah. I was sitting up on cribbing, and then the wind came through and removed most of the roof, and was a very discouraging low point for everything.
Was that 20 years ago when they
2002, I believe.
when they first bought it then, kind of in that opening time frame? Wow.
Yeah. So I get hooked up with these charismatic guys, Mitch Lind and Dwight Fouts, and, and what I want to say, you probably don't want me leading any effort, but you will want me on your team. And I'm a good man to have on your team. What I want to say, I was useful and positive aspect, and then you get, what I want to say, things evolve, and where my skill set is not as relevant anymore. And, so it's not that I still don't have an interest or anything, but what's going on there now is not something that I can contribute to as fruitfully as this other circumstance. So, I spread myself around.
Yeah.
That black locust beam that you cut.
And we cut a couple more pieces for it here this spring. I stand ready to do that kind of stuff. I attend the board meetings, but I really don't. Valerie is a docent there and runs tours, and I'm really not interested in doing that.
Yeah.
So there you go. Again, I've passed the buck to my dear wife to maintain the tradition.
During the tours, do they still turn kind of the last time I was in there, it's been a few years, but from the water level all the way to the top, and that whole building just kind of has its own vibration. Yeah.
Yes, the main turbine is turned on, and it's just always, when I'm giving tours, I always tell the people in my group that it reminds me of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, just because there's so many chutes and pulleys, and it's just amazing how people figured out back then to start with the drag chain pulling the grain in and then taking it all the way to the top floor to get cleaned, and then come down and get milled, and then go back up and get sifted and come back down and get milled again, et cetera, et cetera. It's just fascinating. We're blessed to have a family. When they closed the building in 72, they didn't destroy it. It's a treasure.
It really is. And the fact that those are right along the water in itself would cause most to just, fall away and nobody maintains them. But yeah, like you said, we're very, very fortunate that we still have the one here in the
It
county.
came close. It was looking pretty bad there in 2000.
For our listeners, I will make sure that I put in the show notes, I'll put links to the Stockdale Mill. I believe they have a good Facebook page that stays pretty relevant.
Yeah.
And then Douds County Line Orchard, you guys have Instagram and Facebook, and I'll make sure I'll put both of those in the show notes as well. For our listeners, David, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I'm sure I'll think of something as soon as I leave. Nothing comes to mind offhand. Pleased to have been here and pleased to contribute. I feel good about having lived in Wabash County. Now, I grew up in Miami County across the road, but we're all kind of the same.
That's right.
So I feel fortunate. I've traveled the world. I'm always happy to go home, always happy to get back home.
I'm glad you mentioned your world travels, because it is something that I traveled internationally for the very first time at the age of 40. And it's not that I didn't want to travel. It's when I could first afford it and had the time and space to be able to do that. You guys have also traveled. You've been able to take your kids internationally. Explain to the listener that hasn't traveled, hasn't had the opportunity, even maybe it's not even internationally, maybe it's just they haven't really left the state or the Midwest. What does travel give to you? What does it give back?
One of the best things that I enjoy learning about when I travel is just the connection with other humans in other parts of the world, that even if you don't speak the same language, you can find a way to communicate. And that's been phenomenal to see. Also, our efforts of apple breeding being shared around the world. When we went to New Zealand, we were able to see MAIA1 trees planted in New Zealand. When we went to Italy, we've been there a couple times, and we've been able to see the MAIA1 tree planted there. we often talk, and we might end up getting to go to South Africa and see the plantings there. We're looking forward to visiting other places. But one of the things to me that's so delightful to live on a farm is the fact that we're producing something that's good for you. So we're going places, and more people around the world are realizing that fresh food and fresh locally grown fruit is good for the body. You are what you eat. And so that's a real positive thing to share with other people. And I think when we got married, I didn't think too much about going to fruit growers meetings and things like that. And quite frankly, I didn't get to do that too often until after I retired because I was busy teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Those meetings occur in the wintertime, and I couldn't get away. But it's a delightful group of people. And so just being around other people and just sharing common humanity, it's been delightful.
I think at the core, you're right. We're just all humans. And if we don't speak the same language, maybe we don't typically eat the same foods, or we don't live in the houses that look the same. We're all really the same people. And it makes you really appreciate when you do get to travel somewhere else, the differences, but that we're the same.
Yeah.
I've got nothing profound if we're waiting on something profound. I've been a great honor to share and made good friends in fruit growing regions particularly. Always happy to see them. Richard Hottie's coming up from New Zealand here later this month. I hope I can slip away to New York and meet up with them again. Just have to make the associations a mutually beneficial relationship. It's friendship, but, and the Apple thing is also a business relationship. They are excited. New Zealand, they're projecting a 300 hectares, mile one, mainly for the Southeast Asian market. And that's about a square mile of apple tree.
Wow.
That's pretty incredible, from that single little delicate thing that I received in 1999, 2000, whenever I got it. It's turned into kind of a big deal, and I'm honored to be associated with it.
Well, thank you both for taking the time to be in the podcast studio with me. I think that you both are very fortunate that you found each other, and that you found passion in your life, and you were able to follow that, whether it was in teaching and educating our youth, or kind of following in the family footsteps in the fruit farming and following that along and making the impact that you have through fortune or good luck or combination.
Well, it's if you do the work, it's fortune.
Yeah.
If you fall into it, it's luck. And I've had my share of both. I have things to complain about, but they're pretty minor.
Thank you again for being here. The ThriveIN Wabash County podcast is made possible by Visit Wabash County and Destination Wabash County, and also made possible by the generous support of the Gilman Investment Fund, Sandra Kunkel Trust, Mark and Amy Ford, Paperworks Industries, the City of Wabash, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, and Visit Wabash County. Until next time, I'm Adam, and this is ThriveIN Wabash County.